Welcome to the Fantasy Source Football Podcast. My name is David A. Arnott, sitting here with Brad Pinkerton. We are going into Week 16 of the NFL season, which means it is the Fantasy Championship for the vast majority of you, the Fantasy Super Bowl in your league. And there is a fairly unique situation that has come up this season, which is that I'm pretty certain that for maybe even a majority, but probably a plurality of you guys, that Michael Vick is involved in your championship game. Now, main reason for this being that he was probably a waiver wire pickup or a very late round draft pick, and he probably provided extreme excess value to your team if you managed to pick him up.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about the potential fantasy MVP for free.
Yes.
Nothing more than a waiver claim. And that's pretty amazing. And I think we do have the majority of fantasy championships are going to be decided by Michael Vick this weekend.
I mean, one of the things that I was very fond of pointing out early on in the year is that Antonio Gates was the fantasy MVP of the first 8 weeks, whatever it was, until he hurt his toe. But looking back at the point totals that have been put up over the entire season, Vick's numbers are just mind-blowing.
They really are. And it's such a small sample size that we're looking at, too, still. He missed 3 games after becoming the Eagles' full-time starter with the rib injury. And his point totals are still mind-boggling. It's crazy.
I think it was in the last 8 minutes of this game against the Giants this past weekend, he scored something like 30 fantasy points, something ridiculous, something insane like that, where he just completely salvaged a lot of playoff teams and completely changed the face of the fantasy football world in those 8 minutes. Of course, Matt Dodge being the one the play that everybody remembers. But remember, Vick threw touchdown passes in there, and it wasn't just that they recovered the onside kick and Deshaun Jackson ran back a punt. Vick was making plays left and right. So now that we've seen him for most of a season, 3/4 of a season thereabouts, have we seen enough of him that are you willing to say that he is a first-round pick next year, second-round pick, no matter what happens in these next couple games, and no matter what happens in the NFL playoffs?
All you had to see was the fourth quarter of Sunday's game to realize that he is a first-round pick. The guy is unstoppable at times. And when you're talking about making that first-round pick, you're trying to draft certainty. Not only elite talent, which I think you can find a lot of guys, probably even more than 12 just for the top 12. He is unstoppable, and every week you fear him, seeing him in other people's lineups. So that's the type of guy you want to get in the first round. And after seeing what he did, not only Sunday, but in his brief time as a starter this season, it's arguable that he is the number 1 overall pick.
I think about Vick and think about drafting him. Would I draft him in the first round next year? And think of who the other options are. Adrian Peterson's going to be there. Chris Johnson's going to be there. Ray Rice is going to be there. The standards, the standbys. But I also think to myself, I might pick him in the middle of that first round, but for a very different reason than what you said. I don't think he's consistent in any way, shape, or form. I think that he still has a lot to prove as far as is his pocket presence, an amazing pocket presence he's had this year, is that for real? And throwing out of the pocket as well as running very well, exceptionally well, making good decisions. I think that because he's so dynamic, that's why you take him so early in the draft. Because you know what, you tell yourself, if Michael Vick ends up losing his job in Week 8 to Kevin Kolb, or if he ends up busting out and scoring 10 points a game, well, you know what? You took the chance that he would be a 25 to 30 point performer every week because he showed it was within his realm of capability.
You're basically getting an elite quarterback stats with low-end running back stats in one pick. And I think that's why he justifies falling in the first round, if not the top half. I
mean, this year, when he's played, I think Phillip Rivers has been the next best quarterback on a per-game basis when he's played. And Vick is just... it's not quite Antonio Gates is to other tight ends, but it's pretty close from quarterback, which is insane.
And conventional wisdom tells you that you can pass on quarterback in the first round because the drop-off isn't as severe when it comes to point totals, and you can get one at any point. The difference between Vick and other first-round quarterbacks right now is significant, just between the top tier and Vick. So, again, that's giving you very elite production at a position where you can get a lot of points. And as we saw this past week, he got 40-plus. Second time this season he's done it. I mean, he's mind blowing.
Remember when Vick was rushing for 600 yards and throwing for 54% completions and having basically a 1-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio? He was still a starting quality, low-end starter in fantasy, but a starting quality fantasy quarterback because those rushing yards, they count too.
Mm-hmm. Count a lot. They add up quick.
Yeah, I mean, and you realize after a while that if he is that much a better quarterback, throwing in this 60+% completion percentage, and his interceptions, he didn't throw an interception for something like 10 games. That's insanely valuable, and I would suggest that you actually that when we crunch our numbers for Fantasy Source next year, and when you crunch your own numbers out there, that you actually take into account, look at the difference between what Michael Vick did this year and the next best quarterback. I think you'll actually, although everyone acknowledges how good he's been, I think you'll actually be surprised at how much better, the degree of greatness that he's been.
I was glancing at it this morning, and if you take what Vick has done in the games that he's played in, and you extrapolate that over to 16 games that you could get out of him in a season, 480 fantasy points in standard leagues. Take that point total and just look at what other quarterbacks or other players at any position have done in recent seasons. And the best that came out that I found to compare to was Aaron Rodgers last year, because Aaron had those 5 rushing touchdowns that really boosted his total. He barely cracked 400 points. Vick is on pace, or would have been able to get 480 points. That's absurd.
20% greater.
That's worth first-round consideration.
There you go. Brad, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Thanks a lot.